Good evening and welcome to the January 2nd, 2018 meeting of the Select Board. We'll start with the pledges of allegiance.
Pledge
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the
United States of America,
to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, well, everyone had a great New Year celebration. You wouldn't believe this, but my clock was off, and I was actually a little late for New Year's Day.
Oh, no.
Yeah. My wife was like, we've been together for a lot of New Year's, and you're like 30 seconds late. So,
You're supposed to set it ahead so the kids go to bed earlier.
yeah.
Oh, don't tell them. That's,
Oh, man. All right, so we will start with our regular resident comments. I don't know if we have any tonight. And then we can go to our announcements. I don't know, Stephen, if you have any.
I do, Tom. The first is a relatively minor announcement, and that is that JGS Life Care is having a kickoff event for their dementia-friendly Longmeadow. As you know, our adult center director, Jim Layden, partnered with JGS on developing that resolution that was approved. I don't know if it was the last meeting or the meeting before last, but recently in December. And they're having a kickoff event next week, Tuesday, January 9th, from 5 to 7 p.m. at JGS 770 Converse Street in the Gloff Family Auditorium. There'll be some remarks from our state delegation and some members of the dementia-friendly team. So that's the first announcement. Second announcement is, as I notified the board, there's been some heating issues with the schools. We are working through some of those. The superintendent, I don't want to step on his toes, he's been handling the communications with the parents, but if you have a child in school, make sure you watch for announcements from either your principal or from the superintendent. And, this week I was just looking at a weather alert from the National Weather Service, and when you have a deep freeze and then a period of relative warmth, that's when you find a majority of pipes bursting and water mains breaking and gas mains getting the ground starts to shift and things like that. So we had I think I sent some notes to the board later this afternoon about we called an emergency planning meeting, just to have a discussion about it and looked at the forecast and what we think the rest of the week is going to do. And I don't want to be alarmist, but the potential for water main breaks and pipes freezing and bursting in people's homes is real. And then we go back into a deep freeze for the weekend. And then in the meantime, a nor'easter is heading this way with a very variable forecast at this point. If the storm shifts 30 miles one direction or the other, it can be nothing or half a foot or more of snow. And so I think that people really need to be vigilant, make sure they're prepared. And then, of course, the biggest thing is, if you have neighbors who are isolated or are elderly, please check on them. Tomorrow or Thursday morning, make sure they have what they need to get through the storm. And if they don't, you can call our police department, fire department, our adult center. We can connect people with services. We can make sure they get some assistance. But if we don't know that they're there, it's hard for us to do that. So just watch out for your neighbors and make sure you take care of yourself, because
Right.
we think we're going to come out of it, but it's still going to be, weather-wise, it's going to be a bumpy ride for the rest of the week.
Oh, good. Yes, and I would think that people need to keep an eye on their pets also, because it's pretty cold out there. Marie?
actually, I had a question on that. Some of the houses are empty, whether they're being sold or people have gone south. Is there any way that the water department sees if there's a huge outlay of water now that we have the meters?
I mean, typically you'll see steam or frost on the inside of the windows. You'll see water running down the driveway at some point, but then
Then it's.
it's too late. But
Yeah.
Other than that, we don't. People don't notify us unless they're changing the service over at closing. We don't know.
So I'm saying the water department wouldn't see a meter.
Not in real time.
Not in real time.
It's not in real time. But again, if you have a vacant house next to you, whether the people are down south and you know them, ask them if they shut their water off. It can be turned off at the curb stop. But just make sure people are taken care of to, and that, we are, in some of our buildings, in the next few days, we'll probably let the water run a little bit, just a trickle, to keep the water moving so our pipes don't freeze. If you've got a bathroom with plumbing on an outside wall, it's a good idea to do that. So, like I said, we're doing some planning. We think it's an ounce of prevention is a pound of cure, so to speak.
Yeah. Now, were any of these problems with the schools surprised? I mean, because there was something with the high school, and this is a pretty new building.
Yeah, surprise, no. I mean, when you break 4 record low temperatures in a row, 4 days in a row, you break the record. You don't plan for that kind of thing. I mean, when we've spent a lot of time and energy taking precautions to not end up in the situation we ended up in. What we couldn't have planned for was how bad the temperatures got. In fact, when we had the supplemental heat installed at the 2 elementary schools, Blueberry and Center,
Right.
if you recall, I had corresponded with the board about that back in December.
Yeah.
We had the conversation of, geez, I think the day that the things went in, it was 50 degrees. And we thought, well, this is going to end up, well, if it ends up being a waste of money, it ends up being a waste of money, but at least we, prevented it. And, I mean, thank goodness we did that. I can't even imagine what situation we'd be in without those supplemental heaters at this point.
Yeah.
So we've spent, like I said, we've been very active in trying to foretell what's going to happen and plan ahead and be ready. But there's just certain things you can't plan for, and the level of cold and the duration of the cold weather we've had is, we've used every tool in the toolbox so far.
All right. Okay. Well, thank you. Any other announcements from the board? Well, we can go to select board comments. Do you have any?
I got a public service announcement. It pretty well
Okay.
ties in with what you're saying, but just to remind people how severe the temperatures have been, much more severe than usual. And the cold is really creeping into structures, into places where you may have never had a problem before. And, be very, very aware, especially when the wind gets to blowing, it's going to push it even deeper into your structures. I mean, we've had 2 mornings where it's been -6. And that creeps into the building after a while, especially, like Steve was mentioning, pipes that are on your walls. Open up the sinks, let air flow, even if they're a foot away from the wall. You can't tell if there's air sneaking into the wall. When it gets this severe, it can do some strange stuff in buildings, especially with a little wind pushing it. It'll push it into places where you may have never, ever had problems before, and then this is it. And Stephen's point was well taken. You can actually freeze a pipe right now, and you will not know it. You won't know anything's going wrong until it thaws.
Yeah, unless you turn the
Right, unless you
faucet
turn
on,
it
nothing
on.
comes out.
Nothing comes out, right.
But
It could be anywhere.
it could be any place, a frozen pipe right now, and as soon as it thaws, you're going to have a flooded basement. Stephen, we cannot shut off water, can we, without owner's permission?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because I know of a property right now that apparently has got frozen pipes, and it's in a position of being abandoned, and the owner's not there. And I know when it thaws, it's going to be a flood.
What you can do is, if it's abandoned and it's registered with,
It's informally, it's not officially abandoned.
not officially abandoned.
Right, it's not officially abandoned.
I hate to say this, but we should talk to Pete Thurber to see what means, and we can look at our bylaw and see what means we have, because you hate to wait for it to break before
Yeah.
we can shut it off.
And
Once
this is-
it breaks, we can shut it off.
This is certainly not a punitive shut-off. I mean, this is a shut-off, especially in this case, I think it's for a person that may not be aware of
Yeah.
what's going on.
You say, I think that bylaw is specific for non-payment of
Yeah.
of water. so
Right.
There might be some other alternatives.
Okay,
Yeah.
We can look into that. I mean,
Okay.
all right.
that's it, Tom.
Yeah. Well, shutting off the water would stop future flooding, but as far as, houses need to be winterized, they have to remove all the water,
Not
blow it
everybody
out,
does all
so-
that.
Yeah.
Things happen. And plus, in fact, we've had such severe temperatures this time. Even some of the homes that snowbirds leave, they may leave their heat set at 40, and they may not blow down the plumbing because they've never had a problem.
Right.
And I guess 2 or 3 years or 4 years ago, didn't we have some problems? Have a lot of breaks inside of homes?
We have them every year.
But I mean, it seemed like it was an exceptional bump on it for snowbirds. So, anyway,
I don't remember a particular year being worse than the other.
Yeah, well, you know, I tell you the answer. Two people think I'm crazy, but I don't even spend a night away from the house and I don't shut off my water. It's just not worth the risk. It takes 2 minutes to shut it off, and you save not hundreds of tens of thousands of dollars worth of damage. Anything can happen. You can have a washer on the water, a dishwasher give loose, and it's going to flood your house. Anything can happen. All right.
Okay. All right. If there's no other comments, I guess we'll go to the town manager's report.
In the town manager's section of the packet is the information on DPW design. That's supposed to be with the agenda item. When we talk about it in new business, so I won't talk about that now. I did put the DLTA, Direct Local Technical Assistance Grant document that we received from PVPC. I mean, obviously I was on the road last week, so I couldn't do much of a report. I did put that in here as a placeholder, and I'll let you know that I'm working with Beverly Hirschhorn on trying to pull together a regional effort towards providing Board of Health services. This is something we've talked about, has been talked about in many communities recently and in the past. She's working with the East Longmeadow Board of Health agent on coming up with a scope of work that they can present to Pioneer Valley Planning Commission. There's a few health agents around that are also nearing retirement age like Beverly is, and now's the time to really see what we could put together for a regional construct or a health inspection services district or something like that. I don't know if it'll go anywhere, but that's one of the types of things that if you read the document, the state is really focusing on as part of the compact communities. So that's our focus for the DLTA process right now. I really don't have too much other than, like I said, we're managing the issues on the schools and their heat. That's been, since I got back, that's been most of the time spent.
And what was there's a delay in issuing ordering the new boilers, or they didn't?
No, what happened is the boilers are in, but the burners that fire them had a much longer lead time than we were led. I don't know. It was Dan McCarthy, who has since retired, was managing that effort, and we just found out kind of right before he left that the burners themselves, which fire the boilers, weren't going to be ready until we're hearing Friday. But this was back in mid-November. We found out they weren't going to be ready, and that's what prompted the whole conversation about renting the supplemental heaters and kind of doing all this stuff. Hopefully they will be delivered on Friday like they're supposed to, and the snowstorm won't delay that delivery. But the boilers are in. In fact, I just saw them today. They look great. There's just a hole in the front of it where the burner's supposed to go. But that's why we've just spent so much time, working on mitigation measures.
Yeah.
Tom, I just have one thing regarding prepayment of taxes. As everyone knows, with the new tax bill that was just signed, we had an influx of people come in last week wanting to prepay their taxes. We normally have $200,000 or $300,000 that people would prepay in late December. Last year, we collected almost $3 million worth of it, so people could write it off on their taxes. So they had a pretty big line. They did stay open on Friday afternoon. Normally they close the town hall is closed at 12:30. But again, it was pretty busy, and we did collect quite a bit of money for people taking that last minute advantage of the tax changes. So.
All right, thanks for sharing that. That's keeping people busy. Any other questions for the town manager on his report, or anything else going on in the town? Okay, then I guess we'll move on to old business. There's the Dwight Road Developers Agreement on the agenda, and we just received the latest copy of that.
Mm-hmm. The biggest change, there's only, the big change was the removal of that the last section that we had discussed. And then there was a couple of minor edits that Paul had recommended that were changed in terms of how they refer to the interest rate on the front page. It's just market rate versus they had the federal rate. That was a good catch by him. And then they left out either ban or bond. They had left out that word.
Okay.
And talk about what the revenue's supposed to pay. They just said banned. It should have said banned or bond, ban or bond, and they added that in. So and so I don't know if we want to discuss it further in executive session, or if the board wants to discuss now and consider it.
So if we approve this, they'll sign it, they're ready to go. So that's, well, I'd be open for a motion. I don't know if we really need to discuss it. I know we did spend some considerable time in the executive session over this, and the changes we felt were needed were made to the agreement, and we now feel it's a good representation of what their presentation was and then what will actually be taking place. I don't know if anyone else has a comment, or if anyone want to forward a motion, or,
I
Yeah.
move to accept the DIF agreement.
okay,
I think it would authorize me to enter into the DIF agreement as presented.
okay.
Second.
So authorize Stephen to authorize the DIF agreement as presented, and
Second.
Bill is seconded, okay. Any further discussion on it? I guess the only thing I would like to say is I appreciate the work you did, Stephen, to get this thing in order. I know that we didn't make it easy on you, but, you know, there are certain expectations we've had, and we appreciate you representing them to the point that this is going to get signed the way it is. I'm really happy with it.
So, just very briefly,
Yeah.
Tom, since we're in discussion, if I may, just,
Yeah.
we've talked a lot about it, but we haven't had much conversation in open session because we've been negotiating.
Right, yeah.
Just to summarize, the developer agreement is between the town and, it used to be Middle Franklin, what's he calling himself? Longmeadow Medical Arts Center, Michael Crowley is the primary person we've been dealing with. And the developers agreement basically provides guarantees to the town that when we bond, we were authorized at town meeting to borrow up to $2.5 million to make the Dwight Road corridor improvements. This guarantees that the property taxes will be sufficient to meet those debt obligations, and if they're not, the developer will make up the difference. So basically, what we wanted when this was all approved at town meeting was guarantees that the town wouldn't be on the hook for any of the costs for the improvements, and that the project would cover the costs. And that's in effect what this document does.
Yeah. All right. So if we'll call for a vote. All those in favor? Okay, unanimous, great.
Thanks.
So, we can move on to the next, and it's Bertucci's liquor license change of manager, and we got a form on that. Let me just pull it up. I don't know if there's any questions on that. The new manager is going to be, looks like they've had their serve safe, and it will not be Chris Willis, it'll be Richard Rebusman. And any questions on that, or do we forward a motion to approve this application, or, yep,
Move to approve the application of the change of management.
okay, second, okay. Any other further discussion? Okay, all those in favor? Great, okay. And now we move to new business, which, this thing's flying by here. So we have an appointment, and we have two folks that we were going to appoint. And I'm going to get a nomination for Sherry Knight.
I move to appoint Sherry Knight to the Community Preservation Committee for a 3-year term expiring June 30th,
Okay, we have a second.
2018.
Second, okay. All those in favor? All right.
I move to approve Dr. Richard Elfman, Parks and Rec Commission, for a 3-year term expiring June 30th, 2018.
Okay,
Second.
Second by Richard, okay. All those in favor? Okay, so congratulations, and we thank you in advance for your service to the town. So now we go to a report on the building progress for the DPW and the Council of Aging, and you Yeah.
Before we do that, I just realized I've been ignoring a Post-it note from Debbie on
Oh.
my agenda, which says we should be in announcements, remind people, since we just did the board and committee appointments, remind boards, committees, and departments that
Oh, yes.
their submissions for the annual town report the deadline is Monday, February 12th for,
Okay.
that includes the select board chair's submission.
Oh, thank you. All right.
So, just for, if anybody's watching at home, the boards and committees, you have until February 12th. And the one thing I'll say is the annual town reports, I mean, longer I'm here, the more, I can't tell you the number of times I go back into previous town reports and what a valuable resource they are. And so I think just the message really is for boards and committees to really be as, not as thorough as possible, but make sure they really capture the big things they did and the purpose behind them, not only just the votes they took, but the intent and what they were thinking when they did certain, took certain acts within their jurisdiction, because it really helps when, you go back, Richard and I, Richard's always mining our town reports for stuff, but I remember when I went back and looked at the town reports, we were getting ready to do the DPW vote. And, it was clear what they felt the issues were back in 1980. And it just was, a great resource to have that, because they described not only what they were doing, but why they were doing it. So if you're out there, if you're on a board and commission, you're listening, I would encourage you to be as descriptive as possible.
Okay, and like the Charter Review Committee, as they look at different boards and committees and say, well, what's the value of this to our town? Those reports make a big
Yeah.
difference.
Yeah.
So,
And Debbie does an outstanding job of consolidating and ultimately chasing people down to make sure it gets to the publisher on time. So acknowledge her effort on the annual town report. Simply
All right.
doesn't exist if she doesn't make it happen.
oh, good, all right. And I suppose I can't get her to write my report, I have to actually do it myself, okay? So,
I've been trying that for 4 years, Tom. It hasn't worked for me, so.
okay, I'll get to work on it. All right, so now the
Right.
updates on DPW and the Council of Aging.
Yes. So first, we could start with the DPW. You can see that there's an updated schedule. They do anticipate design development is just about done. There are a couple of phases of review. The first is pre-qualification of filed sub-bidders. Chad Thompson from our purchasing department, as well as our owner's project manager Colliers International, have already done the pre-qualification process. We had to go back out for acoustic tile and waterproofing. We didn't get any responses to those two specific trades. And for those who don't know, this process is all governed by Mass General Law, and it is very specific and designed to prevent fraud, not to make it easier to build a building. So it's a very labyrinthine process to do public construction in Massachusetts. And we are still looking at a bid date of sometime in February of having the bids available. At the public or permanent building committee meeting, Jeff Alberti and Mike Richards from Ty and Bond were there, and one of the things that, as you can see in their report that they gave, was that the market conditions are really affecting the cost of the DPW. And I'm trying to find that paper, but Jeff told the story that they had basically two facilities very similar go out to bid 2 months apart. Same contractor bid both, and the second one was, I want to say 20% or something, like a jaw-dropping amount more, because it was first one was bid in March and the next one was bid in May, and then just that difference drove up the price substantially, because in bidding, one of the single biggest factors in the price you get is the availability of contractors. So February is a good time to bid, because the big general contractors are lining up their work for the year.
Yeah.
And as we look for signs that we're going to enter at a favorable time for bidding, I would describe as a very robust response to our sub-bid pre-qualifications. So the first sign we have that we're going to have a competitive process was the filed sub-bid pre-qualification, and by the accounts of our owner's project manager, it was very successful. So from there, as you can see, we got the report back from the independent cost estimator, and based on the initial report, it was, what's that? Yeah, I'm having a hard time finding one. I was looking at yours. I know it's in here, because there's some narrative that goes with it that I want to focus on. Ah. Sorry. It was about $1 million over in the initial cost estimate, and I don't want people to be alarmed by that at this phase of the game. This is why you do an estimate at design development, so you can flush that type of information out. And so Jeff and Mike both said they're confident that with some of the implementing some of the changes they recommended in their document, as well as a more favorable, maybe a de-escalation from a very conservative market condition factor that the cost estimator is carrying, that we will get this back on budget. As you can see, some of the factors, there is about $300,000 of that cost is HVAC improvements, and that's part of our zero net energy building cost. Working with green, we've always intended for that to be grant funded. So if we just go with code compliant HVAC equipment, then you can take $300,000 out of that 1.1 million. We're working with green communities to grant fund that so we can have that goal of the zero net energy building. We discovered that there's asbestos underneath the paint in the tennis club. If you've been in there, there's a lot of tennis courts. There's a lot of green out there, and so that's gonna add a significant amount of cost to the demolition of that building. Also in the new facility, it looks like that the water pressure tests from both the main that we stubbed in and the service from Springfield don't have enough pressure to provide adequate fire suppression. So a pump room and a pump system for the sprinklers needs to be installed. The building area is always a consideration, so we're going to look at ways to shrink the building area. And like I said, the biggest thing was market conditions and where pricing is going in the market.
Are we feeding off Springfield's main direct
For our domestic service, no, we're going to use our own.
for fire suppression?
I don't know if we're going to do that or not. I just know that they tested both to see if one could, like, if we use Springfield service and we didn't need a pump room, then we would do that. But it's looking like either service is going to require the extra pressure. But I don't know the answer to that
But
question.
we were okay here, though, in the school?
I believe so, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the end of our line out there. So I'll let you know.
But that's also it's very close to the water source, too. The tower. I mean, you're pretty close.
Yeah. Yeah, to be honest with you, we were a little. They did the tests, and it was kind of somewhat unexpected, that result. That we thought we'd be fine, but they ran the tests. They had their specialists come out and do it.
Huh.
But that's where we're looking now. And I don't know the dollar value of that, but it was one of the cost factors.
I'm speaking like I know. Did they put pumps on here? Do you know, Stephen? In this building?
I don't know.
You see, they may have put them in here.
They may have put them in here as well. I honestly don't
Yeah,
know.
they may have. We just didn't know about it. So
As you know, it's a code thing. If you don't hit a certain PSI
right.
for water, then you have to put in the pump under fire codes.
Right.
It's not like a luxury item or an add-on. You have to do it.
Right.
So that was a big thing we discovered. I'm sorry. So we've come up with some ideas of things we can reduce, about $500,000 in reductions beyond the original 300 in grant funding that we're looking to offset. And then one of the things we can do is do bid alternates. Bid alternates is a little challenging because it can make the bidding process confusing if you have too many. And under the construction law, you have to rank them. So you can't pick and choose the bid alternates you like. You have to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and you have to start with one. And so it creates a prioritization exercise that you have to really time very well. And so we're trying to make sure that we have kind of standalone bid alternates that if we do them, okay, if we don't do them, it doesn't harm some other part of the building or make some other part of the building inadequate. But these are all, like I said, this is the time where this all happens, where we figure out what our building is costing in terms of the marketplace today. And, you know, like I said, they have confidence that they're going to be able to get it down on budget and that we are hitting the market at a favorable time.
Now, I noticed that there's $700,000 to do demolition down at the current DPW site. And, you know, my understanding is that the building there was the original train station for the town. I mean, is there any chance that someone would want to buy that? I mean, could we sell it to
Well,
somebody? You know,
the bottom line is that that entire site is a landfill. It's a burn ash dump. It's regular. In fact,
Yeah.
we're working on a scope of services with Ty and Bond
I'm
to
not
help.
talking about the basement, I'm talking about the wood structure on the top.
It doesn't matter.
Oh, really?
The environmental liabilities that are there with that property.
Yeah,
And a lot of it is really just monitoring and reporting. It's not like, I mean, they did a lot of the mitigation years ago,
Yeah.
but you still have this liability of maintaining a cap, ongoing compliance. We cannot transfer that liability to somebody else.
I don't think I think Tom was talking strictly about the structure.
Yeah,
Even lifting the
just
structure off,
lifting
putting it
that-
on a truck and carrying it out of there.
yeah.
So, all right, I thought you meant selling the whole.
No, just the structure, because
Okay,
it's,
so-
a-
Train-
it could be
train
a historic building, you know, it's a train station, and somebody
there
might
was
want it for.
there is an element of that building. How much remains, because it's been modified and added on to over time. And actually, it's funny, I did apply for a grant from the CPA, from the Community Preservation Commission,
Okay,
for $10,000 to retain an architect to go through and answer that very question.
oh,
So, how much remains? Could it be restored? Could it be moved? You know, we did hear at one permanent building committee meeting there was a Longmeadow resident who also owns a local business who is interested in potentially leasing it as is, the administration building and part of the yard.
right,
We've got a ways to go before we can be ready to really determine that. They're going to be in the building for at least another year.
right, yeah.
So as we get closer to switchover, I hope to have all these questions answered long before. So when we get ready to switch over to the new facility, we'll know the next day what we're going to be doing with the current facility.
Okay, yeah, thanks, Richard, for clarifying. Yeah,
But
because
right
the building
now-
itself, sometimes people want those historic buildings for, you know, another function, like.
Yeah, I think it's been, you know, compromised enough where you couldn't really rebuild it. So what they do is they photo document the historic elements, and then you have to go to the demolition delay committee, and they would either hold you up for 9 months or grant you the waiver. But we intend to figure that part of it out well before then. And so insofar as we have a pretty limited number of options with what we can do with the current site, all of our limited options are on the table at this point. Like I said, we just won't know until well into 2018 where we're heading.
Because I guess, I was also thinking too, that there might be some place that the Department of Recreation could use a building like that, and, you know, it might be, it sounds like the price of demolition, I mean, it might be easier to just pick it up and move it to another location in town and use it as some part of the town's recreation
The
facilities.
700's for the whole complex, so.
Oh, yeah, I know,
All the buildings.
Yeah, but I don't know what it would take to move a building that
It's like
would not have.
$5,000 of that is taking that building down and putting it in a dumpster.
You've given 700,000, I'd like to sub that one.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. I don't know if you've ever
tomorrow.
seen like a demolition of a house-sized building, but they come with a claw and in like 15 minutes the
It's
thing's in the
pretty quick,
dumpster.
yeah.
It's so fast.
Yeah.
But well, like I said, we're taking the part about the train station,
Yeah,
you know, seriously. We just want to, like I said, see what's there.
because it's, yeah, so, yeah, thank you, I'm glad that you're having,
So anyway, to go back to
Preserving.
the DPW, like I said, the big report was that we're on target for our kind of our window for bidding. The initial, the report from the independent, it's an independent cost estimator, not Weston and Sampson's person. Our owner's project manager, who's our advocate in this process, has reviewed it. He feels that it's on target. And so we have, I think, some very specific ideas that we can implement to make sure we get back on on budget. And like I said, the hope is to get it below budget. Any questions about DPW?
When is the bidding going to be?
We're looking for an ad date sometime in February.
I have no other questions. Anyone else?
So then pivoting towards the adult center, at that same meeting, our architect, John Catlin, presented his proposed layout for the new adult center. A subgroup, a design subgroup composed of myself, Director Jim Layden, Barry Jarvis, and then from the Permanent Building Committee, our town engineer Andy Carr, and then from the Permanent Building Committee, Jim Moulton and Mary Beth Bergeron met a few times with Mr. Catlin and kind of discussed the program and the vision for the building, and it was an interactive process with him in this subcommittee, and then we presented the concepts to the Permanent Building Committee at the meeting on the December 21st. The one thing I'll say about John Catlin is he just, what Weston and Sampson represents in terms of the design of DPW, where they just do so many of these that you get the benefit of all that experience and that efficiency on our project. He's not quite there, but with senior centers, he's close. I mean, the projects he's done in communities just like ours, and communities nothing like ours, and the lessons he's learned from all those projects have been really invaluable for me, and I think everybody on the committee has really learned a lot of lessons, not only about how they're built and how they're designed, but also how they operate and how those design choices can influence operations. So what he's proposing is a 17,300 square foot adult center and a community gym, which is something we've talked about since the very beginning of this, the need for additional gym space. The gym is about 8,200 square feet. So the total estimated size of the facility would be about 25,000. And that, so with the estimated construction value of about $450 a square foot for the community center and $400 a square foot for the gym, plus soft costs, the total project cost estimated this time, which is very, very early, is about $14.4 million. So if you have some of the drawings in front of you, you can see there's an aerial of Greenwood with the sunlight, the sun images there, the icons. So that's south, and he starts off every design process figuring out where is south and then orienting the building so its users can enjoy maximum natural daylight. And so in his designs, which you can see from the renderings, he looks to employ lots of glass, lots of open areas, so the light filters into the space from the south. Like I said, there's a lot of inventive parts of the design. He wanted to make sure that the traffic, by and large, was kept away from conflicts with the children's center. He did include enough space for basically a flex field that would be suitable for a middle school aged soccer program or 2 youth soccer fields. Lots of parking. He also put in room for a outdoor pickleball court. One of his key design approaches is the elimination of hallways, and this is something we heard about a lot in discussing previous design groups. That's why he proposes a 2-story structure, because what he finds is people tend to use the stairs to get that built-in exercise, but an elevator is still a reasonable enough expense that you get a lot of bang for your buck out of having the elimination of the hallways and tying up lots of space in circulation. You can see that some of the multi-purpose room is a 2-story structure, meaning it's open, it's got a high ceiling, so when you're upstairs, in some of there's a fitness area up there and a game room. You can look down both into the gym and into the multi-purpose room. There's room for our veterans agent, food pantry, our nurse's office. There's the offices for the COA staff. There's large bathrooms. They have a lounge library. There's a cafe sort of right as you come in. And then there's a stage area for the multi-purpose room. And then he's planning some outdoor spaces like an amphitheater. I call it an amphitheater. It's just kind of sloped. But you can do outdoor performances, an outdoor patio. Integrating those indoor-outdoor spaces, and like I said, a game room, arts and crafts, a couple of different classrooms, and so I think a lot of when we look at what are the challenges with our current facility, this really hits all the high points of meeting those challenges, so we can continue to provide high quality and different types of services to the seniors in the future, and then you can see the renderings. And these are just concepts, but he did there were specific design elements that he observed in our community that he incorporated, and as he explained them, it made a lot of sense. So it was a great presentation by him, and I've been pleased with his work so far.
Marie?
Since we couldn't put that on the screen for people at home, is there a way of putting this on the website
Sure.
somewhere so they can find it?
Sure.
And see what we were talking about?
Yep.
Thank you.
And I apologize. I should have done that before.
And they still don't want to have a room for people to change, like a locker room?
There's a locker room.
Oh, there is?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, I didn't see that. It looked on the diagram.
Well, let me say this. I think it's in the bathrooms, but we had kind of gone back and forth on having the bathrooms that are the kind of large gang bathrooms
Yeah.
for the adult center tie into the basketball court, to the gym, so people
Yeah.
could go through.
Okay.
That's an element that'll probably move around a few times, Tom, as we go through design phases.
Yeah.
But a changing room is a design feature that John Catlin also feels like we really
He
need.
also feels, yeah, I mean.
Well,
I
you've got the
just-
rooms off the gym there, it says
Yeah.
men
Yeah.
and women. Is that
Yeah.
the changing
Yes.
those?
One looks like a bathroom.
Yeah, I mean, the big thing is you want the gym, and the reason why Barry Jarvis is on the team is because we want her input on the fields and everything else, and baseball numbers are declining, and that's really the baseball fields that are there are basically slow pitch softball. What we have a really significant shortage of is gym space, and so she would trade 100 baseball fields for a gym. I'm being somewhat facetious, but I mean the
You're
point
getting her in
is
trouble.
the gymnasium
I was
has
gonna
so
say,
many.
if you're building one, that takes all of our ball fields.
So, if gym space, really, and the other thing is, it's the versatility of the gymnasium space year round for the entire community that really makes that a great hook. And one of the design features is the adult center can be, from a programmatic standpoint, can be integrated completely into the gym or completely shut out. So you can have the gym used at 9 o'clock at night when the adult center is long closed for pickup basketball games and things like that. So. He gets it in terms of making sure that it's not a gym to service the adult center. It's a gym to service the entire community that happens to be attached to the adult center.
Yeah, okay. Sounds good, yeah. Of course, I mean, I know our adult center, most nights there's activities going on in there presently, so imagine that would continue. All right, well, these are good diagrams and get a rough idea of the kind of money we're talking about. Good. Is there any other questions for Stephen on either of these projects? I guess we're, all right, so then we can talk about, next thing is a discussion of the residential property renovations incentive. Now, this is something that I've been talking about for quite a bit of time, and Paul is helping me put together some numbers here. But, when I was campaigning, which is almost 3 years ago now,
You're kind of slow
I
on that,
was-
Pete, aren't you?
huh?
Kind of slow on bringing this program forward.
Kind of slow bringing it, well, yeah, it takes a while. But, there were a lot of folks who were very clear, they did not want their taxes going up.
Do you guys mind if I give one to our assessor?
Oh, sure, yes, please. And so this was a way to solve that problem, in my eyes, because people who could afford to increase their living space would be increasing the tax base of the town, and that would make it easy for people who didn't want to increase their taxes, because the town is really pretty built out. So the only way to, we have a few lots left that can be developed, but in the future, when we look at people putting on a second story to their home or putting on an addition that increases the square feet for one reason or another, that's going to help us increase our tax base. And so I asked Paul to help me out with this, and he did some great research. He looked at different renovations that's already come to the town in the last few years. He went back to 2013, and we qualified properties based on if they actually increased the number of square feet of living space, not just redecorating, because we know that that's the most dependent way of increasing real estate over the long run. And so it would be a good, if the town was going to have an incentive, that would be a good thing to incentivize. And so we have this list that, is part of our minutes, but just before I turn it over to Paul, in 2013, there were 11 properties that qualified in terms of increasing their square feet. And then the next year was 8 properties, and the following year it was only 4 properties. In 2016, we had another 11 properties, and then 2017, we had 9 properties. So you can see there's some variance from 11 properties to 4. And this incentive program, my goal would be to get double of these numbers, to try to get, maybe 20 properties every year that would put additions on to their home. We have some folks doing it now, but I believe that there are some people, and I've talked to people who said that they would consider putting addition on their house, and maybe this incentive could help a little bit, because it would allow them to, instead of having to pay 100% of the tax the first year they put the addition on, they would only have to pay 20%. And the next year, that would go up, to 40%, 60%, 80%. And then in the 5th year, they'd be paying 100% of the tax. But it would be an incentive to really, increase the real estate value. So the town is not going to lose, and over the long run, I believe it's going to be something worth looking at. So, Paul, if I can turn it over to you.
Okay. As Tom said, he approached me a couple months ago with this idea about property tax exemptions. And the first thing I think I want to do is where I have the words exemptions on those papers, probably change it to incentives. Because I think as we developed this, some of the thought process changed over time. But what I did is, working with the assessor's office, I went back and had the assessors go through certain things that fit into the criteria, which are listed on the bottom part of the page. We're talking about where we were talking about new growth, basically that was from additions to 1 or 2 family residents that had assessed values of $500,000 or less. That the residents had to be within, living in that space for 5 years or more, so on and so forth. Again, they're kind of listed on the bottom there. So from there, I took only the additions, even though there were improvements, if people renovating kitchens, things of that nature are not included. This is something, again, only that was identified as additions for those 5 years that I have listed here. And based upon the tax rate at the time, we came up with what the additional taxes were on those new properties. As Tom alluded to, we had 11 properties in 2013, 8 2014, and so on and so forth. I listed the tax rate, and you also have the additional taxes associated with those properties that met the criteria. We looked at certain percentages and how to allocate these incentives. And the one that's presented to you is that in the first year that the property fully comes, or the addition fully comes online, the new assessed value, that if there was an increase, that we would offer an 80% type of an incentive. The second year, a 60%, 40% the following year, and 20%. So basically, after a 4-year period of time, you would have a situation where if there was $10,000 worth of additional revenues and taxes over that 4-year period of time, that would basically be split half and half. That half of that through the incentives would go back to the homeowner, and half of that would be retained by the town, or somehow half the town of Longmeadow would get that in additional taxes. After that 4th year, 100% of that improvement or addition would all come back to the town of Longmeadow. So we worked the numbers, and it's probably best to look at those 2 highlighted columns in FY16 and 17, because that in those 2 years you have the full effect of all the years taking place. As an example, for FY16, we would still have some impacts from those incentives that were granted in FY13. You have what would be listed as the incentive, but in FY16, as an example, it potentially would cost the town an additional $17,608 in that particular year, and then we also would have additional revenue in that particular year of $16,000. Further off, going off into the future, all that revenue that would drop, all the incentives for FY13 would drop off, and we would fully get all the taxation on those FY13 additions. So we tried to do that and get an idea of what the potential revenue would be also. So you can see that the revenue, as the years go out and the older types of incentives that we offered the incentives are dropping off, we would still have that revenue coming into the town of Longmeadow. As you can see, it does have a positive flow as far as tax incentives coming to the additional tax revenues coming into the town. The biggest question that I had for Tom, and that we really couldn't identify as to which taxpayers would really, which ones would take advantage of this, and who would actually do this based upon the incentive, and which taxpayers are just going to do this, period. If somebody is going to add a new addition, a new living room, as an example, onto their home, is this going to give them the final incentive to do it? Will this give them the incentive to do it a year or two earlier, knowing that they will get some incentive back over a period of time? It may help do that. So that's the biggest question, and I really don't have an answer for exactly how we can make that determination. But the fact of the matter is that it will have some effect on some people. It will hopefully push some people into this program, and it will accelerate others into the program. Also, I think what Tom had taken into consideration is, again, the issue of new growth, the $25 tax rate that we're being confronted with, that any additional revenues, any additional real estate valuation that we could get, keeps that $25 amount kind of at bay going off into the future. I don't know if I can answer questions on that, or Tom, if I missed anything as far as expanding some of the information. We again tried to get actual information from the assessor's office, which we did, and put those into effect. Now, that 80, 60, 40, 20 are just numbers that Tom and I had came up with. Those numbers could change to, whatever the amounts would be. Where we had originally thought this might be an exemption based upon abatements. Again, I'm of the personal feelings that I don't necessarily think that we can rewrite tax laws to allow that, but certainly we could offer incentives in the fact that we would come up with a budget for this and potentially pay people. I think Tom had conversations with the city of Chicopee, and I think this is where his original idea came from. They had a program where they offered these types of incentives for individuals to renovate and live in three-family homes. They came up with certain dollar values. And what they did is they actually gave them the upfront money at the time of closing. This was basically a time when people were buying three-family homes. We could probably give them some of the upfront money at the time that they're paying a contractor. But what the city of Chicopee did, and I think we would have to do to protect ourselves also, is to also place some type of restrictions that they'd still have to live in these particular homes for a certain period of time. Maybe if we could have an agreement that we have a lien against their home, so should they default on the agreement, that the town would be made whole in some fashion. Again, that's how the city of Chicopee had done it. They basically did it, I think, over a 15 or a 16-year period. I think it was, excuse me, I think it was a 16-year period where every year they would allow $16,000 to go to the homeowner for closing costs. But every year that the individual lived in that home, they would forgive 1/16 of it. So there's all sorts of different provisions that come into play here that I think we're just looking to see if the board has ideas, is willing to move forward in a fashion, what type of ideas there are to enhance this or get it moving forward into the next fiscal year.
Okay, yeah.
Chicopee was motivated on a glut of these big monster two-story homes. So they were trying to get rid of a resource, weren't they?
I believe that they did have a glut, and they wanted people to move into these homes.
Right. That was
and for some blight purposes, to live
Yeah.
there,
Sure.
take care of them. And so, yes, there's different incentives as to why the city of Chicopee did it as opposed to why Longmeadow did it. But I think using some of the tactics that they used, we could very easily use some of those same tactics.
But I mean, they were a total different case. Then.
Yes,
Right,
absolutely.
right.
Yeah, I
But-
mean, I
but,
think,
yeah.
Oh, wait, I'm not finished yet.
I know.
I just wanted to build on his point to answer your question.
Yeah.
Coming from working in a couple of urban areas, owner occupancy has been statistically proven to be a much better community development tool and elimination of blight. And so absentee landlords was a big deal, I think, in Chicopee and other communities.
I agree. Chicopee.
So this is one technique to reduce absentee landlords, increase owner occupancy.
Right. I'm just asking questions, so we don't have that same problem here.
Right.
We're on a total different. This is a very small percentage. I missed, what's your outlay figures here? How much are you figuring the growth is for these projections?
For total new growth? You mean all the
Well,
home
when you say,
improvements?
just for the, like, as an example, for FY 2013, you're referring to the 11?
I mean, how many, which, did you use 8 homes, 4 homes, 11 homes?
Basically, we looked at building permits for FY 11, is basically how it, probably in FY 10, to look at this. And we looked at the difference between the for FY 11, we looked at the difference between the assessed value in FY 10 and FY 11, based upon that building permit and how that building permit affected their value. That's basically how we came up with the numbers that we're using here. We also looked at, on the building permits, we also only looked at the ones that had identified on the building permit as additions.
Right.
So there was some other types of square footage added to the living space. I mean, I know there are others with renovations and things of that nature, but the only ones were chosen for the FY 13 census were those that were additions.
Just additions.
Just additions.
There's a lot more money put into renovations than additions every year in
Absolutely.
our town. Do you have any idea what the split is?
You know what, I don't have it with me, I have it back in the office, but I would say probably the additions were maybe a quarter, maybe, of all those building permits.
That's a lot.
And yeah, it was about a quarter of the census that we had, of which I only took out the additions.
Yeah, because I mean, your figures are getting down to, 11 homes, 1% out of our community would be, 58 homes. So you're down to a very small percentage of our total housing revenue that's being used on the staff. 5,700 homes?
5,600, I believe.
56, so 1% would be 56? and you're down to 11, so you're down to a really small amount. It would seem like the addition, or not the addition, the renovations would be a much higher figure than 75% of that. I mean, I see renovations taking place all the time as you drive through the community by the contractors without additions being done, but
Yeah, again, you gotta understand, since there's also renovations that don't add value. So if somebody's putting a new roof on their house, as an example, you may see that and look at it as an added value, but something to like a new roof does not add value to anything, so,
I was talking about kitchens and stuff like that.
yeah, well,
We're
okay,
in a renovation mode in our community now, especially with the,
right. But again, the list that I'm just visually seeing it in my mind, the list was not all that extensive. Again, it was, 30 or 40 deep
yeah.
at best.
Well,
Yeah.
I think probably, not that I'm casting dispersions on about anyone in Longmeadow, but I'm gonna guess that our numbers are officially low, because there's probably a fair number of people who go ahead and renovate kitchens or bathrooms and don't come see our building office.
Yeah.
Well, true, I would imagine that takes place.
That's why we do our 10-year measuring list,
Yeah.
because you catch it. That's why after the 10-year measuring list, the number jumps way up, you know? So, anyway.
Okay, Marie?
I have a question. I know a couple of years back, about the same time the casinos were coming up, I think you had to be still in town, the housing development was talking about those auxiliary apartments. Is that still percolating in that committee? Because that
Accessory
would,
apartments.
could cause a big explosion here
Can we
in
just
that
do some, Tommy?
we would then be subsidizing all these auxiliary apartments.
I thought we did. I'm unaware of an explosion of in-law apartments.
No, what I'm saying is if that bylaw
Oh.
comes up again, then this could all of a sudden we would all of a sudden be subsidizing. So that's the only concern I have, is if both these things come together at the same time. This
Valid.
program,
Right.
if the auxiliary apartments, then gets passed through town meeting.
Valid point.
Is that a first come, first served fund?
Again, I think the
being
concept is just
proposed.
being thrown out there, but I think you would probably want to limit the dollar value on an annual basis to a first come, first served basis, so that you limit the exposure, and do it something in that fashion. I would agree with that.
And we're also looking at, the owner has to be occupied in there, and so.
That's
it
true
would
of the
be for their
auxiliaries,
own. Yeah, so they have to be there, and we were, one suggestion would be that they would have had to have lived in the home for 5 years, so that way, people aren't just gonna buy it, put an in-law apartment and move out. And the other thing is
Yeah,
that.
but what after they could sell it as soon as they do the addition,
Well,
too?
this is, the other thing is that the agreement is with the owner, and so when they sell, it would be over, it'd be exempt.
Right, be exempt.
That they wouldn't get any more exemption.
Right, I'd get my benefits for the first year, and then I sell the place.
Yeah, but at that point, what the city of Chicopee did is they put a lien on your property.
No, I mean,
For the additional taxes.
yeah, but that goes on to the next person.
No.
No, it has to be
can't sell.
satisfied at closing.
You can't,
Well,
has to be
yeah, certified
dealt with
closing,
by
but still,
closing,
I'm
yeah.
out of it.
Right.
Yeah, but then we're chasing you
I'm just saying,
legally.
It's just answer your question about the number of renovations that you've seen
Yeah,
in town. We've also looked at, these renovations are only ones that added value of $20,000 to $100,000.
Oh, okay.
So there are gonna be some that are fell below that threshold of 20. I'm sure there's a few that went above that.
Right.
So there are some of these little criteria that had some impact on the numbers.
Yeah, because I know you can't even do a kitchen for, what, 60,000 in this town. It's 50,
But
60.
what value does that
Yeah,
add? I think there's a difference
right.
between how much you spend and what value you add.
Well, I don't know, some of the homes has a fair amount of value. I don't know what the assessor would say on it. If you take a 1960 and bring it up to date.
I could probably share what the information that the assessors gave to me, because I think on that, it would have the increase in the assessed valuation, but it would also have the building permit.
Right, well, square
The value
footage.
of the building
Yeah.
permit.
Square footage undoubtedly is the best increase in
Yeah.
value. Okay,
Right,
hands down. No debate on that.
Yeah, Marie?
Have you found this program anywhere else, either in the Commonwealth or the country? Because what we really need is for someone who might have done this to say, oh, yes, it did incentivize, it did motivate, and we had an increase of additions. Have you found
Yeah.
anyone yet?
Well, my wife asked me the same question,
Oh,
of
okay.
course. And so, I originally heard of it through a town of Arundecote, New York, which did that, and I would need to do some research to find out, how much it did incentivize and increase the, the amount of, expansion of the town. So I could look into it. Now, in our state, we can't legally give a tax break to homeowners. We can give it to businesses, and I think, Bill, we talked on the phone about this, that's commonly done for businesses, but for homeowners it isn't. And for our town, we really need to look for a way to incentivize homeowners to expand their properties. There are people who move from home to home in our town. We know that. They'll live in a smaller house, move to a bigger house, a smaller house. But there are also folks who realize that the least expensive way for them to increase their floor space is actually to add on a second story to their own home versus buying a much larger place. So this would open the door for those kinds of incentives. But, we would only cover up to $100,000. It wouldn't be for someone who's going to really do a really big expensive addition. The town wouldn't be subsidizing that more than the $100,000. And it's really just to get things moving. And as you can see, as Paul pointed out, in the year where we had the most payouts of this hypothetical 2016, 2017, it was about $17,000, $18,000, $19,000. So we're not talking about taking a big chunk of the town's budget, and so Chicopee, they had their incentive program was $40,000, and if we had $40,000, if we could double these, that would be pretty good, because when you get to the final total over here of $167,000 of new real estate that could be taxed, and you get that every year, once the program's done. So if we did this hypothetically, we get through this, then we have $167,000 extra in our budget every year from then on, because properties also increase in value. It isn't just you put in another room or that then stays at, if they say, okay, that's worth $100,000 more, but in 10 years from that, it might be worth, quite a bit more than that, yeah.
Yeah, but it's going to be based on need of the family to do the addition, number one.
Yeah.
And it would seem like we know, we got an idea. Chicopee was a whole different case. I know
Right.
we use it, and it's valid, but I mean, they were a blight situation. But ours, I can't imagine a significant jump in people wanting to do additions because they can defer taxes for a couple of years in this community.
Mm-hmm.
I may be wrong. I really may be wrong, but
Yeah.
I just can't imagine them lining up on the courthouse steps and wanting to bid these things.
Well, I don't know.
So,
I think that's the $64,000 question.
Right, yeah.
Would it incentivize, is it enough of an incentive to all of a sudden make a difference?
Yeah.
And I would say, what's the downside? Is there additional work that has to be done, I guess, to figure this out every year?
A lot of
It's just a matter
administrative.
Yeah, certainly there would be some, again, I think once you got the ball rolling, it would probably flow pretty easily, but, that initial, what documents do we need type of thing, and
I mean, if you did it and it didn't seem to do much, and all of a sudden after a couple of years, you're like, well, that didn't really, you could end it, except for those people when they,
yeah, I mean, the downside is you gave up this cash
right.
and the values don't rally. That's the downside.
Right. Or-
right.
Yeah.
And I guess to build off your point, like I said, when I worked in the city of Lowell and the city of Worcester, they had different kinds of incentives, and really,
Yeah.
the key thing is what's your goal And Tom's goal, which I agree with, is how do we increase our assessed values when we are built out and not going to bring in a major employer or something like that into this town. I mean, certainly if Springfield's economy gets stronger, our property values, that'll have a positive impact on our property values. But one of the things I would recommend, maybe for Tom and I can do this, or maybe if the board wants to do this, have a hearing on it at some point in time to talk to realtors. I find that real estate agents are usually the single best resource on, you know, and a lot of it's anecdotal. They do a lot of market data crunching, but a lot of it's anecdotal, where they're hearing from buyers where they say, you know, I've talked to real estate agents, and there's just people who simply, I mean, there's a lot of flippers. I mean, a lot of people come in at Longmeadow and flip houses because there's so many buyers that just don't have the imagination to take a property that was built in 1950 and not touched, which we have many that fit that category, and can't see the vision to say, geez, if I renovate this, then I'm going to get a lot of value out of it. They want a home that's already renovated. And so guys come in, they buy houses, and then they flip them over. And then they get the buyers who want the already completed house.
Yeah.
So I think the key question is, where is this line between additions and renovations in terms of where do they see the value adds? And how do they think buyers are going to respond to this? How do they feel about our parameters? Are we really going to create, you know, the type of value growth that we think we're going to? So maybe that's something we can talk about as well.
Yeah, that's a great suggestion, yeah.
The realtors will think it's a horrible program because they want people to buy new homes, not to put additions onto their houses.
Right.
So I'm not sure if they'll really encourage you in the process.
Right, but you can buy a home and do this. You just have to stay in the home.
You have to stay in
Right.
the home. Well, we were saying you had
Right.
to be a homeowner for
Well,
5 years before.
Right,
Yeah.
again, those are all concepts that we base this upon. It's not to say a final product can't have different criteria.
Yeah, I mean, because like a place like Chicopee in the urban areas, you can buy the home and get it. You just have to stay in the home for 16 years. And so maybe that, and as Paul's right, I mean, I don't know what is the right way to do it. It's basically you have to custom fit it for what Longmeadow's real estate market and our housing stock and our, oh, by the way, how many houses are impacted by the inability to add on because of setback requirements and our zoning bylaws. These are all variables that I think that realtors can kind of get you to a next level. Not answer all the questions. We're never going to answer all the questions. But answer some of the questions. But I think if you wanted to stimulate home sales, you would make it so people could come in on the first day. Because in a realtor say, listen, by the way, they have this program. So even though this house is a two-bedroom cape built in 1950, if you renovate it and add an addition on, you're going to get this incentive program. That may incentivize people into buying homes.
Yeah.
Right. Like I said, this is not the same thing. But when I lived in Washington, D.C., they gave people $5,000 tax credit for buying a home in the district. So if you moved into the district and bought a home, you got $5,000 off from the city of Washington, D.C., the city government.
Yeah.
Now, it coincided with an uptick in the market anyway, but that unlocked, I mean, just a flurry of real estate activity, and a lot of people attributed it to that housing credit. So you can do things like this, and they can have success. You just have to make sure it's the right fit for the community. And I don't know where the board wants to go. Maybe we can, like I said, identify a few real estate agents that we can invite to a kind of a summit.
Yeah, no, that would be a good thing. And like Paul was saying, if you did have this agreement, and then if the person, didn't hold up their end, we'd have a lien on the property. So we wouldn't just be giving money to developers to change the look of our
Developers
town.
wouldn't be doing it anyway. They're not homeowners for 5 years, so you're throwing a word on there that
Right.
it's not applicable. I just, sure, look into it. I still think it comes back to the fact of how many people are going to put additions on their homes.
Yeah,
And once that, you determine that, then that's your market. And
yeah,
I can't imagine that I'm going to put an addition on my home because you're going to give me this tax thing. Because if I don't need the addition, I'm not going to increase my tax bill 5 years from now. I'm just not going to do it. So there's a need ratio, and if there's a prime reason, I think it's a valuable program. But everyone that's been mentioned, there was a driver. DC was a driver. Chicopee was a driver.
No.
I'm not sure I see the same driver at Longmeadow, but that's just a first blush.
But I'll tell you, I would.
yeah.
I would do this.
Well, you'd be motivated by something other than this, because if you're not, I got a bridge I'm gonna sell you.
No, but basically, if I'm at the point, because I'm actually, not to say that I'm going through this right now, in discussions at home anyway, but I have a ranch,
Right.
okay, and I'm locked side to side. So if I want to add space, then I would want to go out the back and add an addition, whether it's a four-season room or whatever. So I'm just using my own home as an anecdote. You don't get 100% back of the value of your improvements right away. It takes a while to build that equity back up. So if you spend $30,000 on a four-season room, it only adds $10,000 or $15,000 to the value of your home. But as that equity proposition flips, I mean, this is the way this stuff goes. I don't think I'm saying anything way out of school. Right now, there's an economic model that suggests I'm better off buying another house and capturing the value that I have in my own and just get the house that's right for me right now, or maybe that I can do more work to. But something like this, where I'm kind of on the fence, may tip the scale in favor of investing in the home I'm in now. But the biggest thing is, I think you're going to get more of that than you think, Richard.
Well,
But the
maybe
biggest
you
thing I
will.
think we have is we have homes that it's an older building stock, and how do you get those to flip over and get people to invest in those and then live in them and not flip them? That owner occupancy model,
Right.
I think that's a worthwhile goal. I do think that this concept is the bedrock for something that could do that. At the end of the day, we may just decide it's not worth the money to do this and the headaches and everything else, and there may not end up being a gain from it. But I don't know that sitting here right now, we have enough answers.
Right. But the preliminary numbers that we've crunched, which I appreciate Paul's help with this, would show enough of an increase in the budget. And, you think about a budget and you have an extra $100,000 or $200,000 to spend, even in our budget, that's a really helpful amount of money. And so,
But we're already getting those homes.
Well-
We're not showing an increase, Tom, that's what I'm talking
no,
about.
but this model
If
be
you're saying
based
this is
on,
gonna double it, then I'm gonna jump on board, but if
Yeah.
it stays the same, I'm saying,
yeah.
those
Well-
people are gonna do it anyway.
Well,
But
this
maybe
is,
not.
again, it's a preliminary discussion, because we need to talk, and I agree with Stephen, look at realtors and look at what are the needs of different segments of our town, because like some younger folks might say, I just want to add on, I want to move, I don't want to go through the expense of selling a home or the expense of buying a new home and moving, and so, we may have to look at
They're
all
gonna do
those.
it, but they're going to do that anyway. The
Well-
tax burden is not that great.
Well, yeah, I guess that's true,
I
yeah.
mean,
We'll
it's
have
not.
to see how it's maybe played out in other towns.
Yeah.
Because this is a model, we need someone who can look retrospectively, have
Yeah.
tried it and see how it works.
Yeah.
They might say they doubled, so
Yeah.
I'll be interested to see what you can find from other towns.
Yeah, because because again, if our numbers double, for like a year where we only have 4 people who put additions on their home that would qualify, it wouldn't be too hard to double that to 8, and if we can double every one of those years, that would really make a big difference. So I appreciate you, participating in the discussion on this, and I do can thank Paul for all his work to start to crunch some numbers.
What's the next step?
Well,
You get realtors?
Yeah, does the board want to invite a few realtors to come here and have a discussion about it, or do we want to just maybe?
Maybe a subcommittee?
yeah,
You and Bill, you have a lot of experience in this.
Yeah.
I'd do it.
Yeah.
okay, great, yeah. We could-
So
the
we'll
three
get
of
together
us.
and we'll figure out some people we want to talk to about it. Sure.
Okay, that'd be a
I
great
think it also
next
has to be
step.
part of the FY19 budget process if we're going to have some incentives, so that's kind of the target date. If we want to get it going for next fiscal year, we'd have to build it into the budget.
Right, and so if we funded this of like $40,000, which should, mean that we had pretty good participation, that's about, what, 0.05 of our budget?
Yeah, I mean, it's nothing, but again, the budget, put together the preliminary numbers, we got to,
Yeah,
obviously, we have more requests than we do money, so
always, yeah.
it's one of those things.
Okay,
Yeah.
great.
Okay, I'll ask you offline.
Okay, well, thank you. The next would be the discussion on the amendment to the foreclosure bylaw. And Richard asked me to add this to the agenda, and
Yeah, we, just a discussion item.
Yeah.
At this point, we have a foreclosure reporting requirements. We did pass a bylaw that said they're going to log their properties in. And I think at that point, we talked about it, we still don't have any kind of policy covering a written policy covering the care of the structures once they fall into foreclosure. As far as the upkeep and making sure that these homes aren't getting in further disrepair. And you know, even in our community, we do not have, we have a bylaw that says you can't have your grass over 8 inches tall, but we don't have a bylaw that says you can't have 4-foot blisters of paint coming up the side of your building.
Did we do that last year?
No,
Oh, we didn't?
no, we
We
didn't.
talked about trying to do something, and I don't think we followed through on it.
So what we did last year was we took it from foreclosed to vacant.
Right.
Oh,
Because
that
the
was
issue we
it.
had was there was properties that had not been foreclosed upon, that they were just vacant and falling into disrepair. There are some tools like the grass, the bushes, a door, you know, safety and
Yeah, but are
security
they being
issues.
driven by public health, Stephen? Is that the driver?
Public health and safety, yeah.
Yeah.
But how did you do the Young Mansion? Was that based on, was in the district?
No, safety.
That was safety, okay.
Yeah, with the falling down. Well, what about, you know, you're talking about, Tom, you're talking about increasing tax base.
yeah,
And I'm talking about something that noticeably decreases your tax base.
yeah.
A dilapidating structure, a structure that is sorely in need of repair. I mean, it's going to destroy your property values a lot more than the incentives you're talking is going to save you. I mean, overnight, Bill, you're in real estate, you know how much
Maybe
curb
the town
appeal.
goes in and fixes up the house, and thereby increasing their taxes.
And
Yeah,
well,
'cause
Then
some
we
places
raise the
have-
tax.
But we don't have any
What a trick.
provisions in our community to help our code people enforce some sort of visual quality standards of these residents. We've got the public health part, that's there. And Stephen, you got a lot of question marks there.
No, I know we talked about it, and really, I want to say, I thought town council, that there were property ownership rights issues in Massachusetts that made that a challenge, but I don't know.
I don't remember.
I know there was a lawsuit several years ago concerning that, but I don't know what the outcome of it was, and I don't know if we've ever got, but you know, regardless, I mean, if we gotta go for legislative change, sooner or later, we gotta stop it. Now, you know, I drive through town, and there's some pretty distressing looking pieces of property. I mean, there's no doubt about it. They're just not being cared for. And they're usually right in the middle of a block with well-maintained homes all around it. Now, there may be extenuating circumstances. If they are, you can turn on the social welfare programs and all that stuff and give people help. But you just could have somebody that just doesn't care anymore, or is abandoned property, or is walking away.
Or doesn't have the means.
Pardon?
Or doesn't have the means.
Or doesn't have the means, but that's a different
Financial
issue
means.
then. I think that's clearly,
But driving by on the street, it's all the same.
driving by in the street, it's all the same. It's a visual quality thing that you get when you go through our town. And it is a discussion. I think it's a valuable discussion. I've always been very conscious of the neighborhoods that I live in, is the visual appearance of the neighborhood. And when I see it starting to slip, it's time for me to move. Because I know my property value is going to follow my impressions. It never goes the opposite way.
Yeah, you know, I think conceptually, and I know we've talked about this a bunch in the past, and I keep thinking that, and I can't remember what it is, but I keep thinking there's some hurdle that applies to the Commonwealth or applies to our town that makes it very difficult to have like an HOA type set of
Right,
bylaws.
Right.
And I can't remember off the top of my head what it is, but I feel like we've bumped into the wall on this a few times. But I think the thing is, Richard, to your point, the best house on the street doesn't bring up the property values of everybody else more than the worst house on the street drags everybody down.
That's true.
I mean, the impact on your value is much greater by the worst house than the best house. And I think that's, and I still don't know what the answer is, but I don't know what the foreclosed bylaw thing is. Oh, jeez.
Well, that was registering the foreclosures and,
But at least it gave you a means to deal with the grass and the bushes and,
Right.
and everything else.
Bill, I was wondering what you would think of this, because a lot of values of homes are looked at comparable sales, and how do properties in the, how do you think that affects sales? I mean,
Well, I think what happens is if you have a property that's in disrepair and deferred maintenance and paint and these kinds of things, the price is gonna be lower.
yeah,
I mean, and does it bring, if you're asking me, does it bring down the values in the neighborhood?
Yeah.
I would think, yeah, absolutely.
yeah.
Well, when you go to finance, the appraiser
Right.
goes around, does the comps, and they see that, oh, you know, another numbered house in your street sold for $100 a square foot, and everybody else was at $150 a square foot.
Mhm.
They don't, and if the house has since been renovated, or they don't know what the deal was, and so there's a lot of times they don't do that subjective analysis, and so it just has this negative impact on the per square foot values.
Yeah. Yeah.
But if it's not a foreclosure, it's just a beat up house.
Yeah.
But then that is the market, though.
Yeah.
Right, it's accurate. Yes, Marie?
I think that one of the things that he's doing now, and when he's targeting the foreclosed bylaw, is that we're not talking HOA, we're talking about, this is a way of maybe getting in to get the banks to clean up a property. I think it was very successful with the Young Mansion. Can we just expand that a bit and say, the visual quality standards must equal the neighborhood? And find some way of just opening that door to slip in and tell the bank, you better clean this up, because it's been sitting foreclosed for a couple of months. Paint the front of it or do something. And I guess if we could look into that further to see, is there something in the Commonwealth statute saying we can't do that?
Stephen, there's got to be something on public health part, of the grass and the bushes and all that, or the safety thing. There's some entanglement that allows, because I've heard what you've heard. I don't know what the outcome of the lawsuit was, but public health is usually pretty easy to pull off, because it's an environment that harbors rats and what have you, and criminals hiding in bushes and all that. So it's really easy to slip that in. Can't hide behind blistering paint.
Right. The stuff that you're talking about, we have.
Yeah.
Those
yeah,
we have in place.
Right.
Um,
And maybe that's why it was never challenged,
Yeah.
because it's a recognized thing. It's just,
Maybe just go up and test each paint chip, and if it's lead, then you can say we've got friable lead paint. You know, like I said, I don't know what the answer is. I still don't know what the answer is, but I know it continues to be a problem.
Yeah.
And this is, but Richard, to your point, I think there's a linkage between the two subjects. If you incentivize, if you make it a good value for people to go in and take one of these troubled properties, maybe that's it. Maybe you attach the incentive to make the value of the home lower. Instead of up to 500, you make it up to a smaller amount. And you incentivize people taking on these difficult homes.
most of those people are just doing alterations, though. They're not building on, they're just
Right.
cleaning up.
Maybe we redefine it.
Yeah, well, that's true.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
maybe there should be.
You could have, you could even, I mean, it gets a little dicey, but you could certainly have, you know, some kind of board of directors or board of trustees for this program where they evaluate each application on its own merits. And so it's not first come, first serve. I mean, then you get into, it gets a little dicey with who gets selected and who doesn't. So you'd have to have pretty good criteria, but you could make it where each project is evaluated on the overall gain, you know, you make from it. I mean, there's a million different ways to skin this cat.
Right. And of course, visual standards also look at personal preference, you know, and some people's personal preference is that every bush is trimmed. I worked at a place that had a lilac bush that was always beautifully trimmed. It never flowered. It never flowered because you have to let it have new growth in order to get flowers. And some people like their forsythia with long strands of yellow flowers, and other people want them just like a hedge. And so, you know, I think that dictating to say that, you know, your personal preference isn't acceptable in our town is, I think it's a dangerous
Well, I
territory.
know how you feel in town.
Yes.
Blistering paint is blistering paint.
Well, I know blistering paint
That
is
has nothing
different,
to do with the
but the other
recipients'
side is if we had put pressure on the owners of the brewery, the bank, to paint that facility also, that may have been too much, because that's a big cost to have them paint that whole building.
Well, Tom, sometimes it just falls under tough.
Yeah,
You're going to let the town standards go down the poop? I mean, you've got to stand up and implement something.
right. Well, they might
There's
just,
visual quality in your community, or it can decay to a point of non-return.
Yeah.
And you don't want to get to a point of non-return. When people start not coming to Longmeadow because of something they see, then we've gone too far. We're trying to get ahead of the game.
yeah,
And you and I can track, you and I walk the neighborhoods. There are a lot of pieces of property that
Yeah.
could use care.
right, yes, we did,
And it's what we consider customary care.
yeah,
It's not brand-new windows, it's just painted structures.
right,
And
Yeah.
reasonable care being put on the visual quality, that's all.
yeah,
And you can prune the shrubs so they don't bloom, too.
right. I recall one home we went to, and it was in need of repair, and the owners were both in hospital beds in the living room,
Mhm.
and they weren't able to really take care of that property.
Right.
Yeah, but they deserve to live here. They've probably been here
That's
a lot longer
that's a
than us.
different question.
Yes,
Well, we do have is that fund down at the senior center that people want to stay in their homes, and there's funds to help care for their houses, and those are people that need help.
right,
We're really talking about foreclosed properties, and
Right.
so I'd be interested, Stephen, in finding out, is there a limitation, according to Commonwealth statute, on what we can require the banks to do in a cleanup?
all right.
If you could get back to us on that.
Okay, any closing points on the amendment to foreclosed bylaw?
No, there was no amendment, it was just
Okay,
discussion.
well, it says discussion of the amendment so we will keep the discussion rolling.
Yeah, this is just an opening discussion.
Maybe when
Okay.
we hear back from Stephen on the legal limitations, we'll have an
Okay.
idea of what we can or cannot do, and find out, I know you've been doing research, what other towns in
I'm
the
not finding
Commonwealth.
much yet, I'm finding stuff, but it's
Yeah.
non-conclusive, but I'm still searching.
Okay, and then,
Well, I won't say, if I slip out of Massachusetts, it's pretty easy to find these standards.
Yeah.
I mean, I'll be honest with you, you slip a little bit south of here, their standards all up the wazoo.
Right, but that's,
But you get above the Mason-Dixon line, and the standards, they don't have that,
I'm positive that we have a memo or something from a past time from either Paul Healy or town council that basically lays out why this is.
Yeah.
Not saying not doable, but
difficult.
not the way we're thinking about doing it.
Right, right. Kind of a backdoor fix,
Yeah.
yeah.
okay, so that brings to the end of the new business. And the developers agreement, Stephen, you signed that? We don't need to sign that,
Yeah,
right?
you authorized me to sign it.
We authorize you to sign it, so that's all set. Any subcommittee reports?
Well, with Energy Task
Yeah.
Force is working away.
Okay.
There is a program through the Grinspoon, and we've told the schools about it, and it's funding for educational programs to encourage sustainability and conservation. And so the schools are, some members of the task force are working with the schools to see if they can put in some grant requests. And some of the original goals we had voted on last spring as the select board to approve. Some of them were specific for the schools in regards to various schools trying to conserve their energy and their use, and having the children become involved with that. So hopefully by the end of January, we'll have word on whether we were able to get any of the grants, and the schools were able to start up some programs.
Oh, good. So we'll look forward to hearing later in the month. Thank you. All right, then, we did get a couple of letters. Everyone got those, and then we will be moving to executive session.
I mean, we don't need to now.
Is that-
I
oh,
mean,
we don't
you
need
could
to
do the
because-
minutes, but those could keep till the next executive session.
Okay, because it was just improvements and talk about the diff, and since we've already had a vote on it, then we will not be leaving for executive session. We can just,
Motion to adjourn?
yes, a motion is seconded?
Second.
Okay, all those in favor? Okay, well, thank you very much for tuning in, and,
Well, oh,
yes?
yeah.
And I think Deb had given you a copy of the draft warrant. Did you get-
Oh, the draft
Um,
for the town meeting?
Right, I don't think we can approve it today, it wasn't on the agenda, but it does have to be posted by, I think, the 11th, which is next Thursday, so you may have to have a special meeting just to sign off on this.
Okay.
When do we want to have the meeting then?
Well, I
All
guess,
you need is 3 people, 5 minutes.
Next Monday?
Or could, do we have to have a meeting, or can we just go?
No, we have to vote.
You have to have a meeting, you have to vote to approve the warrant and sign
Has to
it.
be on the agenda.
It can be, this is, when the planning board has to do this, to call it public hearings, meet their deadlines, a lot of times they'll meet at 8 o'clock in the morning in town hall. And they just say in the agenda, reasonable accommodations will be made for people who cannot access the meeting, like, because we have the stairs.
We could do fire department.
Yeah, or do fire department, just 3 people get together for 5 minutes to do the thing.
well, would we want to do it this Friday morning? The 8th?
Was that
Or
enough
no, it's the
time?
5th?
48 hours is what you need, so Friday could get you done.
We would, okay.
So
Post it first thing in the morning.
do we
Yeah, we have
have...
to post it.
Bill
Well, we have to post
I-
it.
I know I could be there. Oh, we have
Well,
to,
what's-
we'd
what's-
have to post it
48 hours, we
tonight?
got plenty of time.
So you'd have to make it about 9 o'clock.
Wednesday, Thursday?
Right. But yeah, so you'd have to, but if it was a 9 o'clock meeting on Friday, you'd have to
Oh,
post it by 9 o'clock
There's a
tomorrow.
big storm coming on Thursday. Shouldn't we
Oh,
just
yeah.
look at next Monday?
We'll have it at your house.
Okay. And
It'll
you
get
think you're going to get
snowed
up my
in.
driveway?
All right, yes. Snow.
At 5 o'clock, or, I mean, whatever's convenient, but, you know, again, it's just before the 11th.
Yeah.
I mean, we could have it here, you know, it doesn't matter, just, if the room's not available.
Come and get me, you'll get me down the street. Okay.
Yeah, we can get you in here.
You'll get me
If
in?
needed, I mean, if there's a quorum, you don't even need to come in.
Well, it's up to you when you want to post it. I'm available any of those days.
Well, I drive in any weather, so I would do it Friday morning. It's not a problem.
Yeah, it'll be all done by the end of Thursday, so Friday should be fine.
It will be.
Okay, and
Friday, 9
we
o'clock.
would do it at 9 o'clock, is that, or can we do it at 8?
I would do it at 9.
Just to have a
9 a.m.
little...
Friday?
Okay,
The first thing in the morning.
so 9 o'clock this Friday,
Where?
and should we do it at the police station?
Why don't we say, in order of availability, A15, A12, fire
Here.
station,
Okay.
Okay.
you know, because it depends on the or police community
We
room.
can meet in the
Oh, I
hallway.
see.
Yeah.
Schools would be in session. You might
We can
go to
meet just
fire
right out in the lobby.
Yeah, why don't we just do the fire department then?
No, the fire department?
Or police community room, we'll check, sometimes they have trainings and stuff, so either fire department or police community room.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, because the schools are shut down for some crazy reason or something's going on, so.
Okay, and so that meeting on this Friday will be to vote this warrant for the special town meeting, which will be January 25th, 2018, just to make sure that we haven't missed anything in this description of the property that is requesting a zone change, that everyone in the town will be voting on. And that it's not a surprise thing. There's a planning meeting coming up, and then there is also a town meeting to discuss this issue, so everyone gets put their,
Yeah, the planning board hearing, Tom, planning board public hearing is the 17th, Wednesday, 17th at 7 p.m.
Wednesday, 17th. Yep. And that'll be held where, in this room?
I think it's here, yeah.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Okay,
And the town meeting's the Thursday. I'm forgetting that. It's Thursday the 25th, not Tuesday.
Thursday, the 25th.
oh,
yeah.
Thursday, yes. Okay. And, all right, so, and I guess we're adjourned.
We got all ready to vote.
We haven't
You
voted
ready to
yet.
We
vote?
didn't vote.
Oh, good. All those in favor? Okay, we're adjourned. Thank you for tuning in. See you soon.
Thanks for coming.